Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. The call came in just after lunch. Nothing unusual on paper. Dispatch logged it as a disturbance on Hyde, a male acting erratic, foaming at the mouth, possibly on something. Nothing I hadn't already seen twice in my first 3 weeks wearing the badge. But there was something in the dispatcher's tone, clipped and flat, like she was reading from a script she didn't like. I was still on field training under Officer Deacon, a mountain of a man who carried himself like he'd been carved out of discipline. 6 foot something, ex-Marine, hands like cinder blocks. He didn't waste words, didn't like small talk, and didn't explain himself when he gave orders. I just followed, because that was safer than asking questions. It was one of those San Francisco Fridays where the Tenderloin stinks like baked garbage and diesel fumes, and the heat settles low between the buildings, trapping every smell the city has ever collected. The kind of day where tempers run short and trouble finds you, even if you're not looking for it. We were cruising southbound on Larkin when the first code 37 came through. Stolen vehicle. Nothing new. Then another. Then 2 more back to back. All within minutes. Deacon didn't comment. He just reached over and turned the radio volume down like the noise itself bothered him. I glanced at him and caught that look. Head tilted slightly, jaw tight, like a dog catching a distant sound before you do. It was the kind of thing you feel before you understand. "You good with your belt gear?" he asked, voice steady, eyes still on the road. I nodded automatically, but my hands brushed over everything anyway, double-checking what I already knew. Glock seated, OC spray clipped, cuffs in place, radio secure, everything where it should be. Still, the vest clung hot and itchy against my back, and for reasons I couldn't explain, the quiet hiss of dead static in the mic felt louder than the city outside the cruiser. When we pulled up on Hyde and Turk, the scene was already sideways. Civilians were shouting. A man in hospital scrubs was staggering toward traffic, bloody up to the elbows. A city bus was jackknifed halfway over the curb, one of its front windows shattered. I followed Deacon's lead, drawing my taser. We approached the man in scrubs. He was muttering something, teeth chattering even though it was 70 degrees. I remember the weird way he held his arms, like a puppet with strings cut. "Sir, stop right there," Deacon's voice carried. "Hands where I can see them." The man's gaze snapped to us, not to our faces, to our necks. He moved in a jerky half-sprint, mouth open wider than made sense. A string of saliva hung from his lip and swung when he lunged. I let the taser darts fly. One dart stuck, the other kissed fabric and slid. He staggered but didn't drop. Deacon stepped in and shoved him hard against a light pole, forearm to collarbone, weight committed. "Get cuffs," he said. I went for wrists. The man snapped at my fingers. I jerked back. His teeth clacked on empty air. No pain, no restraint, just animal drive. I got one cuff on. Deacon tried to pin the other hand. The man whipped his head and bit his own cheek without reacting. Blood smeared his chin. He didn't flinch. A chorus of shouts blew down the block. The bus driver was waving his arms from the open door, yelling for help. Passengers inside pushed and clawed at each other like the air was running out. A woman pounded on the glass with both fists until the skin split. Her eyes were clouded, like milk poured into water. "Finish him," Deacon said, meaning finish securing, not anything else. I got the second cuff and double-locked it. We slid the guy down the pole, seated, arms wrapped around steel. Deacon pulled the bus key that hung on a nylon lanyard from his vest and tossed it to me. "You go, I'll hold this corner." I sprinted for the bus, radio at my shoulder. "Central, this is 4 David 1-2, bus crash at Hyde and Turk, multiple injured, possible contagious incidents, request EMS and additional units." My voice felt thin against the roar coming off the street. Inside the bus, the air smelled like old coffee and bleach. People were crammed in the aisle, some slumped, some clawing to get past the driver's shield. The driver, an older guy with a giant's cap, had a bloody sleeve and a look I won't forget. Back up, give me space," I shouted. I unlocked the back door and shooed the able-bodied out, hands up slow, one at a time. A teenage boy tried to shove past. I planted myself in the doorway and made space with my forearm, not gentle. No one argued. 2 passengers weren't moving. One had a deep neck wound. I placed a hand near it and felt heat like a car hood. The other was breathing shallow, eyes rolling. Her breath whistled. She grabbed at my sleeve with both hands and let out a sound that didn't fit her face. I had to peel her fingers off. Behind me, glass exploded. I turned in time to see a man slam a metal trash can against the remaining front window and tumble through the frame into the street. He got up on hands and knees, looked around like a lost kid, then bolted crooked down Hyde. A woman in a flowered dress chased him, shoeless, one heel bleeding. She wasn't chasing for help. She was hunting. Back door, go! I yelled to the cluster that still had enough sense to listen. The driver squeezed out. Thank God. I helped him down and kept the rest moving toward the curb, where Deacon had made a rough line with his body language and a bark that cut through panic. Sirens multiplied. An ambulance turned onto Turk and froze when the crew saw the crowd. The driver hit reverse. A patrol car took its place, lights flaring, and 2 officers jumped out with shields up. One shield had dried spatter on it, dark brown. The man in scrubs we left cuffed to the pole had levered himself up and was craning his neck toward a group of people pressed against a storefront. He twisted his forearms until I heard something pop. He didn't stop. Skin tore at the wrists and he kept pushing. Deacon, I pointed. He was already moving. He put a shoulder into the man's chest and planted him back down. A 3rd officer ran up with flex cuffs and a length of chain. He looped the chain around the pole, then the cuffs, then the chain again, like he was tying a bike. The man thrashed and chewed his lip raw. The radio came alive. All units, be advised. Multiple disturbances citywide. Potential exposure event. Avoid close contact with saliva and blood. Use barrier protection. Stand by for CDC guidance. That word, guidance, floated and never landed. Then a scream tore down from halfway up the block. Not one scream, a layered scrape like train wheels. A woman staggered out of a narrow doorway, half dragging a man whose shirt was soaked at the collar. Behind them, 3 figures pressed up the stairs of the SRO. The first had that same cloudy gaze. The second moved fast, too fast for the stairs. The third crawled under a handrail like a spider. Inside now, Deacon told me. He pointed to a corner store at the intersection. Barred windows, sun-faded beer posters, a bell that had seen better years. We anchor there and pull whoever we can. We hustled a dozen people through the door. The owner, a Vietnamese man with a ball cap, and a veteran snapped to his movements, pulled the grate halfway down without waiting for instructions. He slid a 2x4 through the brackets he had screwed into the frame years ago, like he'd been waiting for a day nothing would make sense. The bell clinked. Then the street noise became a muffled ocean. Name's Hui, he said, short and solid. You bleed. You tell me. You cough on my kids. You go out. He didn't blink when some of the group bristled. He looked to me, and then to Deacon. You help? You in charge? In here, yes, Deacon said flat. We need to block sight lines and keep them from seeing movement. We need water, tape, anything we can use to quiet doors. Hui slapped a set of keys on the counter and pointed at a back room. There is a ladder to the roof. There is a fire escape to the alley. I have canned food. I have a first aid kit. You two handle the door. I will watch the side window. We moved. I dragged a metal rack of chips and tipped it on its side against the glass, creating a low wall. Deacon had 2 guys help lift a fridge dolly and wedge it behind the locked grate. Hui's wife, a small woman with impatient hands, taped brown paper bags over the door glass so anyone outside would see only dull brown. Phones, Deacon said to the group. Anyone have a charge? Turn off all sounds. Brightness down. No more calling unless it is life or death. We keep quiet. We do not draw attention. He glanced at me. You, take names. Count heads. Note injuries. I moved person to person. Driver from the bus, name Raoul. a nanny with a girl who wouldn't let go of her arm, a line cook with a split brow, a woman who said she was a nurse and said her name was Sophia. She had a bite on her forearm wrapped in a napkin. She said a dog did it 2 days ago. She avoided my eye when she said it. The radio spit out new lines like someone at HQ was reading from a sheet they didn't believe. Shelter in place for affected blocks. Avoid saliva exposure. Lockdown is being implemented by district. Avoid proximity to the infected. Do not use lethal force unless there is an immediate threat to life. Immediate threat to life came knocking. A man slammed against the grate so hard it rattled like a drum. His face mashed into the bars and left a smear. His eyes found movement inside, and everything else about him went still. Then he began to push his tongue through the gap between 2 bars, like he wanted to taste the air we were breathing. Back from the door, Deacon said. He kept his voice low like he was teaching a class. He held his baton horizontal and pushed the metal rack forward 1/2 inch. We are not doing a show for the sidewalk. We killed the freezers to stop the hum. The sudden quiet made every scrape outside sound close. Somewhere up Turk, someone fired 3 quick shots. Then nothing. The nurse, Sophia, met my eye. We should sort supplies, she said. Water, clean cloth, gloves, and find a place for anyone who looks sick, away from the rest. Back room, Hui said. He did not look at her arm. We used cases of canned tomatoes to build a waist-high barricade, pointing from the counter to the bathroom, a simple funnel. We stacked soda flats along the side window, leaving only a vertical slit for a glance at the street. A teenager in a concert shirt made a tripwire with fishing line and empty cans along the back door handle. He grinned, nervous and proud, when the cans clinked whisper light after he tested it. Noise is bad, Deacon reminded him, eyes on the door. I know, the kid said, but if someone gets that far, we want to know. A new sound joined the mess outside. A helicopter far off, chopping slow. Then, a PA tone rolled over rooftops. We went still. Citywide alert. Residents and visitors are advised to remain indoors. The rest washed out in street bounce. The voice came again, clearer, and used the words quarantine and temporary, and do not approach infected persons. It never said zombies. No one did. The grate shook again, softer. A child's voice called through the slot at the bottom. Please, please let us in. Deacon looked at me. I looked at the group and saw everyone making the same calculation. Risk versus mercy. Hoy shook his head once, slow. How many? I asked through the door, close enough to smell metal. Me and my dad, the voice said. He's hurt. We check first, Deacon said. He kept his Glock low, not pointed at the slot, but there. He motioned me left to cover the side window. Hui handed me a small flashlight no bigger than a thumb and a pair of mechanic gloves. We cracked the door 2 inches. Deacon's foot stayed in the track. I crouched and angled the light through the bottom gap. 2 pairs of sneakers, both dusty. The smaller set had dried juice on the toe. The larger left a smear when he shifted. Hands under, palms up, I said. The hand slid under the door as asked. The larger hand shook. Scratches, dirt, no bites I could see. Faces, quick, Deacon said. We lifted the grate 4 inches. He looked at the eyes first. Both clear. The boy's lashes were clumped with dust. The father had a cut on his scalp that had bled hard then dried. No clouded gaze, no fixated stare. Inside, quiet, Deacon said. Hui relented with a tight jaw and lifted the 2x4 in a smooth, practiced motion. They slipped in. The boy whispered thank you a dozen times. Sophia pulled the father toward the back room to clean the wound. She peeled the napkin from her own forearm while she worked. Her skin was pale under the wrap and mottled near the bite. She met my eyes over the father's head and put a finger to her lips. Not a secret like a child would keep. A request to let her finish helping before we asked questions she didn't want to answer. The light outside shifted as clouds rolled in from the west, dragging a grey veil over the block. Afternoon is when the Tenderloin feels closest. Smells hang low. The people who sleep in doorways start thinking about where to bed down. And under all that, there is a hum of late-day tension. Today that hum was a cracked speaker, deep and wrong. The radio spat. All available units, report status. Be advised, Tenderloin Station is establishing a local perimeter at Eddy and Jones. Crowd control teams are en route to Civic Center for triage. Avoid Powell Street Station. Repeat, avoid Powell Street. Powell is gone, Deacon said, like he had already known. He looked to the ceiling, thinking through map lines. If we hold here until dark, we are in trouble. We move before the sun drops. We head for Tenderloin Station. Short blocks, cut alleys. Keep our heads low. We do not run unless we must. If we run, we pull everything chasing us. You will take my family, Hui said. It wasn't a question. We move as a group, Deacon said. We do not split. We bring only what we can carry without slowing to a crawl. If someone gets grabbed, we do not pile in blind. We break contact and regroup. We do not get surrounded. I caught myself counting ammo. 3 magazines plus the one in. OC spray. Taser had 1 cartridge left. My radio battery showed half. I had never felt the number half mean so much. Sophia returned from the back room and handed me a bandage wrapper to toss. He'll be all right, she said. Head cuts look worse than they are. She tucked her forearm under the hem of her sleeve. The motion said not now more clearly than any words. We made a quick plan. Hui had a box of contractor trash bags. We tore 3 and used them as makeshift ponchos to break up our shapes. Raoul the driver found a roll of duct tape and made 2 black X's for the door, a signal only to us in case we had to fall back. The teenager with the cans, his name was Marco, tied a length of twine around each waist so we could keep contact in the dark without yelling. The boy and his father stood near the counter, quiet and watchful. The boy squeezed a keychain flashlight in his fist over and over, but he never clicked it. We listened for a minute, making a recording of the street in our heads. Voices moved left to right. A single engine idled and then coughed dead. Glass tinked down somewhere like falling ice. There was no single roar. The infected were not a wave yet. They were a set of sparks, each starting its own small fire. Deacon nodded. We go now. Hui slid the 2x4 out. I held the grate. Deacon lifted it slowly. The cans at the back door stayed silent. The street through the slit in the paper looked emptied of anything but trash and wind. Single file, Deacon said. Stay low. If I stop, you stop. We bled into the street like shadow. The city's color felt wrong. Too many reds and silver flashes. Not enough blue sky. I took rear. Marco was in front of me, twine around his waist in my right hand. The line cook with the split brow kept tugging at the back of his own shirt like he wanted to hold someone else too. We cut right into an alley that smelled like fryer oil and rain. The fences were tagged and leaned inward. A cat shot out from under a bin, and we all half froze, then moved again, angry at ourselves for giving a cat that much power. At the mouth of the alley, we stopped. 3 infected stood in the intersection, rocking on their feet like ship passengers. One wore a necktie soaked dark. Another had a hotel slipper on just 1 foot. All 3 were looking up at something on a roof, hypnotized by motion we couldn't see. We crouched behind an old mattress. Deacon squeezed my shoulder and pointed left. There was a delivery gate half open on the side of a laundromat. We slid under and found ourselves in a narrow corridor jammed with plastic baskets and a machine humming like a quiet generator. The hum hid our footsteps. A woman stepped out of a side room with a folding banker's box in her arms. She saw us and froze. Her eyes flicked to the boy, then to our uniforms, and some of the tightness left her shoulders. Please, she whispered. My mother is inside. She won't move. She says she will wait for my brother. He is not coming. We have to keep moving, Deacon said. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it like gravity. We cannot take anyone who will not walk. The woman's mouth trembled. She set the box down and nodded once. Then she did a thing I will remember until my last day. She turned and went back into the side room. There was a murmur of voices. Then she came back out alone, eyes clear, and locked the door behind her with a key she slid under the mat. She pocketed nothing. She kept nothing. She stepped into our line without breaking. We exited through a rear door that opened onto a narrow connector alley the city didn't bother to name. There were lights 2 buildings over that flickered like a bad bar sign. I could hear sirens to the east, probably Civic Center. Between those sirens came the new sound that meant night was approaching, a mass of voices that didn't speak words. Left, Deacon breathed. Then straight 3 blocks, then right on Eddie. We moved block to block, using parked cars for cover. Twice we had to stop and tuck behind a dumpster while infected drifted past like sleepwalkers, then snapped their heads to follow a flutter of a flyer in a window. Motion ruled them, sound called them. Pain did nothing to them but make them faster. At the corner of Hyde and Eddie, we came up short. A city truck had hit a hydrant. Water fanned across the intersection, making the pavement slick and shining. In the middle of the flood lay a man in an orange vest, breathing hard. The water pushed wrappers around his legs and the paper stuck to his skin. "We go around," Deacon said. "No," Hui said, stepping up before I could grab his sleeve. "He is alive." "Alive does not mean safe," Deacon said. Hui looked at the boy, then back at the man in the street. He made his choice and moved into the water. The boy's father reached to stop him, then let his hand drop. "Cover," Deacon said to me. He watched the corners while I watched Hui. Hui took 2 steps, then 3. He crouched and spoke low to the man in the vest. The man shook his head and tried to sit, failed, and struck the pavement with his palm, frustrated. Hui hooked his arms under the man's shoulders and dragged him to the curb with short, efficient pulls, not a wasted motion. When they reached us, Sophia knelt and checked the man's scalp and throat with quick, practiced fingers. No bite. He's bruised and stunned. He can walk if we help him. "We have to keep moving now," Deacon said. "We've been in the open too long." We moved as a tight cluster through the spray, shoes squeaking. The water made a curtain that might have been our luck. Behind it, shapes shifted, curious but hesitant. Sound of water, smell of wet concrete, and our line slipped across. Our luck ended at the next block. A small crowd had formed around a liquor store, pounding on the door. Inside, a man waved a baseball bat and screamed for them to go away. The crowd wasn't made of infected. It was made of people who wanted inside and didn't care who owned the lock. A single infected could be understood. A crowd like this couldn't. "Eyes forward," Deacon said. "We don't change that math today." We slid past as quietly as a dozen people on wet pavement can. The crowd didn't see us. The man inside the store saw us and mouthed a word that could have been help or could have been go. He raised the bat as someone put a concrete paver into the glass. I did not look back when the window cracked. At Leavenworth, we ran into our first true wall. Someone had stacked metal barricades across the street and chained them to 2 parked cars. A hand-painted sign said, "Quarantine, do not enter." Beyond it, a single patrol car sat nose out, empty, red and blue soaking the block. "Left," Deacon said, but a chorus of howls, not animal but close, floated from that direction. "Right," he amended, and we went. Right put us onto a block with a shuttered diner and a hotel with a missing door. A smell like old linens and something sour drifted out. A figure lurched in the lobby, hit the frame with a shoulder, then wheeled back into the dim. "Keep the line tight," I said, voice low. We crossed mid-block, almost to the far corner, when the boy's keychain finally clicked on. A white cone of light shot at the pavement. He jerked and switched it off. Too late. A head turned in the hotel lobby, then another. Hands found the doorframe. Feet began to shuffle faster than shuffled before. The lobby vomited 3 infected out onto the sidewalk, then 5, then more, as if the building had been packed floor to ceiling with nothing but hunger. "Move," Deacon said. Not loud, not soft. We moved. He took the lead into a narrow breezeway between the diner and the hotel. I brought up the rear, and for the first time that day I pulled and fired. 2 controlled shots to the chest of the first infected in the gap. It stumbled, then hopped up like a spring. Not human, not in the way I understood. A 3rd shot to the head put it down. I did not wait to see if it stayed. "Don't waste rounds," Deacon called back. "We use doors, gates, turns." The breezeway opened onto a tiny brick courtyard with a wrought iron gate. Locked. Hui passed me a bolt cutter like a magician pulling a scarf. He carried it on his cart for years and never needed it. I snipped the chain and pushed the gate slow so it wouldn't squeal. It squealed anyway, loud enough to pull shadows to the fence behind us. We poured through the gate and dragged it shut. Deacon ran a bike lock through the bars and twisted the dial with a fingertip so fast it impressed me in a way my brain should have saved for a calmer day. Hands hit the gate as he finished. Fingers curled through. Teeth gnashed at air. "Keep moving," he said. "We are 2 blocks out." The last stretch to the station felt like a world tour of the city coming apart. A man stood in the center of O'Farrell wearing a stained suit and yelled stock quotes at an empty street. A woman sat on a milk crate and sang a lullaby to no one. A dog trotted past with a loaf of bread in its mouth and decided we were not worth the trouble. When the station came into view, the squat brick building with the flag hanging limp, I felt something go loose in my jaw I hadn't known I was clenching. 2 officers manned a checkpoint at the door. A sergeant waved us in, eyes scanning for bites the way a medic scans for breathing. Inside was organized chaos. Desks pushed into a barricade. Radios on every surface, most blasting static or the same looped warning. An officer I recognized from day 1 in the academy handed out nitrile gloves by the handful. Someone had written, "Do not touch your face," on a whiteboard in letters that got bigger as the sentence went on. "Status," the sergeant barked at Deacon. 1 officer, 1 trainee, 12 civilians, 1 injured but walking, Deacon replied. "We need a room to stage and a plan to get these folks to Civic Center triage if that exists." "It exists," the sergeant said, but his face said it existed the way a snowman exists in April. "We hold here until we have a corridor. SWAT is stretched. EMS is triaging at UN Plaza. We lost Powell. Civic might go if the perimeter fails. Keep your people contained and calm." We were assigned an interview room and told to keep the door closed. Hui's kids huddled on chairs. The boy with the keychain, now chastened, turned the flashlight into a toy he never clicked. Marco pulled his hoodie tight, then loosened it, then tightened it again. Raoul the driver perched on the edge of a table and stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Sophia asked for gauze and tape. She rewrapped her forearm with the economy of someone who did this often. When I looked, she lifted her chin. "Later," she said. Later arrived fast. A commotion at the front desk sent a ripple through the station. 2 officers dragged in a man by his armpits, half carrying him. His shirt was shredded at the shoulder, and the skin beneath was purple and swollen. He didn't struggle. He kept reaching for the ceiling light, grasping at nothing. "Lock him up," the sergeant said. "Separate from the others." They put him in a holding cell and shut the door. He paced the length like he had a metronome in his head. On the 3rd pass, he slammed his forehead into the glass partition with a thud that pulled every eye in the room. He didn't stop. He did it again. The glass spiderwebbed. "Back!" the sergeant yelled. The room obeyed. The man reared again. The glass gave on the 4th strike. He fell forward and landed on his knees. He stood, careful, like a marionette being lifted, and pivoted toward the nearest sound. An officer with a taser popped him. The barbed wires lodged in his jacket. He convulsed and dropped. Then he stood again, slower, and reached for the officer like the taser had been a polite cough at a dinner table. 2 officers went hands-on with shields, pushing him back into the cell and slamming the door. 1 slipped on a paper cup and went down to a knee. The infected man seized the moment and lunged. It wasn't clumsy, it was fast. His teeth clacked close enough to make the officer flinch. Deacon stepped in, baton across the neck, levering him down. Not a flourish in the motion, just trained physics. The sergeant raised a shotgun and fired beanbag rounds center mass. The thump of impact knocked the wind out of the infected man, if there had been wind to take. He slowed. He didn't stop. "It's not enough," someone said, and no one argued. An old officer with a scar along his jaw reached for a fire extinguisher, popped the pin, and blasted a cone of white into the cell. The powder wasn't meant for this. It still did a job. The infected man coughed, gagged, and pawed at his eyes. For a handful of seconds, he was a thing that could be shoved, and the officers shoved until he toppled and stayed down. "Get the cuffs. Ankles too," the sergeant said. "We wait this out. We do not let it in any farther than it already is." I returned to the interview room and tried to make my voice normal. "We're safe for now. We have officers on every door. Sit tight. Drink water." "We cannot stay," Hyde said. "This place is a bucket under a leak. Drip, drip, drip." He wasn't wrong. The station was a target because stations are always targets when the world gets hot. People come for a badge the way moths come to porch lights. Some hope, some hate, some need. All focused on one door. The sergeant knocked and poked his head in. He looked at Sophia's arm, and Sophia lifted her chin and waited for the question. "When did that happen?" he asked, not unkind. 2 days ago. Not a human bite. A dog in the mission. I cleaned it. I have no fever." "We are screening by symptoms now," he said. "If you feel wrong, you say it. If you do not, you keep your distance and you mask up. We do not have enough rooms to separate everyone." He handed her a surgical mask and a pair of goggles that had fog on the inside from the last owner. "Oh, and officer," he said to me, "we might need you on the roof. We've got a group gathering out front." "How many?" Deacon asked from behind him. "Hard to say. Half and half. Some are infected. Some are just scared. They look the same from 30 feet when the light is wrong." We went to the roof. The sky had that boiled grey that presses down. The city looks small from up there, a maze of vents and water towers and clotheslines that never come down. In front of the station, a crowd had formed a messy half-circle. A woman screamed at the door to let her in. A man banged a wrench on a stop sign. 2 infected pinballed at the edge of the group, confused by the motion, not yet committed. "PA," the sergeant said. "Give them instructions. Not promises. Instructions." Deacon took the mic. "This is the police. Step back from the doors. Triage is at UN Plaza. If you are not injured, shelter in place. We will open this door when we have room. If you rush it, you will be turned away." The woman screamed louder. A man threw a bottle. It shattered on the concrete, and pebbles pattered against the door like dry rain. An infected at the edge of the group heard the glass, snapped to face it, and sprinted 3 steps before it tripped and slid. It got up faster than it fell, and went toward the densest mass of people. "Incoming," I said. 2 officers at the door stepped outside with shields, and pushed the crowd into a loose funnel away from the infected. It was messy, but it worked. The infected ran headfirst into a shield and bounced. Another reached for an arm and got rubber instead of skin. The officers moved like wrestlers, turning bodies with their hips, never taking a bite straight on. Behind the crowd, another infected rounded the corner, then a third, drawn by the noise. It took us 15 minutes to disperse that crush back down the block, and when we did, the street looked worse. Trash everywhere, shoes lying in the road with no feet in them. A stroller tipped on its side like a broken shopping cart. Night settled fast. The city's lights came on in islands. Some blocks went dark and stayed dark. A couple of buildings blazed like nothing could touch them. I found the contrast offensive in a way that wasn't logical. We rotated shifts. I took a hallway. Deacon took the roof, then the door, then back to the roof. Hyde slept sitting up with his arms crossed and woke every 10 minutes like an alarm clock. The boy dreamed with his eyes open. Sophia checked the injured man's head every hour and wrote times in pen on her palm. Marco put his ear to the wall and listened like the building might speak. Around midnight, the radio lost patience and started screaming through the quiet. "All units, be advised. A full lockdown is in effect for the Tenderloin and adjacent blocks. Avoid Powell and Civic Center unless in a secured convoy. Maintain distance from infected. Bite exposure is presumed contagious. Repeat, presumed contagious. I looked at Sophia. She looked at me. We didn't say anything. She pulled the mask tighter and added another layer of gauze. The sergeant came by the room and put 2 boxes on the table. MREs. He told us to eat half and save half for the morning. He said water would be prioritized. He said EMS was overwhelmed and asked if anyone had medical training beyond first aid. Sophia raised her hand and did not explain herself. He nodded and moved on. Around 2 in the morning, a thud rattled the side door. Not a frantic pound, a single measured hit. We gathered at the corridor, quiet as mice. The door shook again. I peered through the peephole and saw a man standing too close. His breath fogged the tiny circle. His forehead had a straight-line bruise. He blinked slow. "Help," he said. The word sounded like a word learned phonetically. "We can't open this door," I said. "Go to UN Plaza. Follow the lights." He blinked slower. Then he hit the door again and kept hitting it with his forehead. Soft hits. Persistent. The rhythm started to burrow into the room. The boy covered his ears. "Step back," Deacon said to me. He walked to the electrical closet and came back with a fire alarm pull station key. He popped the cover on a wall strobe and cranked it once. A high-pitched chirp cut the air. Then another. Then the strobe started flashing. The man at the door turned his head toward the light that bled around the frame and went quiet, frozen by the staccato. We waited, breath short. The man backed away like he was retreating from a cliff and staggered into the alley, hypnotized. He never looked back. "Light distracts them," Deacon said. "File that." It was a small trick, but a trick we needed. Through the night we used it twice more, and twice more it bought us minutes. Minutes were gold. At 4 in the morning, we got an escort request from a block 2 streets over. A low-power radio in the next room crackled with a voice that kept saying, "Please," in a way that wasn't theatrical, just worn out. A small shelter had 20 people inside, and a generator that was coughing its last. The sergeant looked at his map, looked at the door, and looked at us. "We're short," he said. "We can do it," Deacon said. He didn't look at me to see if I would agree. He knew I would. "Take your civilians?" the sergeant asked. "Absolutely not," Deacon said. "They stay here." Hui gripped my sleeve. "We will not sit while you go," he said. "You will," I said, and I smiled in a way that wasn't really a smile. "You keep the door. You keep your kids quiet. When we come back, we move again. That's the deal." We stepped into an air that had cooled and gone sharp. The street felt like a stage after the actors went home. We used side routes and found the shelter by the noise a failing generator makes. A hiccup that repeats like a metronome with a cough. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of soup. Faces turned to us as if we were poured in by a pitcher. No one cheered. They looked tired. The kind of tired you earn with a long life. A man with a navy cap nodded at Deacon in a way that meant he knew his breed. "We go in 2 groups," Deacon said. "Quiet, close. No lights unless needed." He scanned faces. "If you feel sick, you say." A woman raised her hand and put it down in the same second. Her husband held her wrist. "We will stay," he said. "We do not want to slow you." "We are not leaving you," I said. "You are not taking us," he replied, and there was no malice, only decision. "Close the door behind you, young man." We moved the first group without incident. The second group had a stumbling block in the form of a patrol dog that had broken free somewhere and cornered itself in a fenced yard. The animal whined and looked guilty for being alive. An infected heard the whine and came jogging fast. Deacon took it with 2 rounds, center mass, then head, and the dog flinched and went silent like it understood the larger message. Back at the station, dawn thumbed the horizon grey-blue. The infected changed with the light. Some slowed. Some climbed into shadows and watched. Day did not bring safety. Day brought clarity. We saw how many we were. We saw how many they were. The sergeant wanted to move a convoy to Civic Center. He wanted SWAT vehicles and sirens and machine-cut corners. What he had was 2 SUVs, a box truck with half a tank of gas, and officers who were now breakfast tired. He made the plan anyway. That is what a sergeant does. "Deacon, you take point," he said. "Rookie, you ride rear. Keep eyes on the civilians. Keep them quiet. Keep them moving." We loaded our little group into the box truck with room to spare. Hui stood near the front with a hand on a pole. Sophia sat on a crate with her forearm turned away. Marco took his twine and pocketed it like a souvenir. The boy held the keychain light and never clicked it. Raoul the driver nodded to me from a perch near the door and said, "Let's pretend it's a shuttle run." The convoy rolled slow. 2 SUVs nose and tail, lights only, no sirens. We cut down Jones and then slid left onto Market like we were trying not to make eye contact with a famous person. The city opened up and showed its ribs. Storefronts with metal pulled halfway. A cable car stopped at a crosswalk. No one on it. Cable humming under the street like a ghost. We made it 1 block before the world closed a fist around us. A city bus lay on its side across Market, doors toward us, roof toward the ferry building like a turtle flipped in a shallow river. The driver's body was nowhere visible. The inside was a jumble of hands and shapes, and none of them were moving as humans move. The first SUV braked hard. The box truck did the same, and I pushed civilians back with one arm without thinking about it. From the side streets, infected flowed in with that awkward acceleration that makes your nerves misfire. Some sprinted, some shuffled, but all converged. The convoy was a magnet. The SUV's engines revved and tires squealed wet. Going backward would put us in another knot. Going forward meant a bus we couldn't push. "Out," Deacon's voice came over the radio. Calm, the kind of calm that held your spine straight. "Foot move, westbound. Use the awnings for cover. Keep a wall at your left." We poured out of the truck and hugged the line of buildings. Infected hit the SUVs, palms slapping metal, teeth gnawing at rubber add-ons like animals at a carcass. One slid across the hood on his stomach and flopped to the pavement in a way that would make a sober person stay down. He got up like gravity had misapplied to him and went right back at the light bar. We moved as a smear, not a line. The awnings gave us shadow and a rhythm to hide under. A woman with curlers in her hair stood on a stoop clutching a broom and asked what was going on. I told her to go inside and lock the door, and she said she lost the key years ago, and the landlord never replaced it. She looked at the infected and made a decision with her face. She closed the door anyway and held it with both hands. At 7th Street, a barricade of city trucks gave us a choke point, and with it, a choice. UN Plaza lay beyond the trucks. The sound from that direction was wrong. It had the depth of a stadium without the joy. The sergeant called a stop. "New plan," he said. "We hold this block and we signal. Either the plaza is stable and we feed into it, or it's broken and we pull back to the station and rethink. We do not commit to a funnel without eyes." We took position behind the trucks. Officers spread out. Civilians dropped to a crouch. Hui handed out water without asking. 1 bottle to each pair of hands. Marco asked me if his fishing line trick would do any good out here, and I told him yes, even if it wasn't true, because hands need tasks or they do dumb things. A group emerged from the plaza side, not infected, not officers, volunteers in vests, faces grim and ready. They carried a stretcher with a person on it. The person had a sheet over the face, and yet the ankles twitched under the cover like strings were being pulled. The man at the front of the stretcher looked at me and shook his head half an inch. He had made his peace with a task he hated. "The plaza is a mess," he said. "Triage is overrun. We are shuttling to the library steps. The big building tells people to be quiet." "Library is glass," Deacon said. "But you are not wrong. It's a stage we can control." We fell into a pattern of escort and returned that chewed time. Move a group, hold a corner, use the strobe trick when a knot got too curious, swing a door shut to deny sight. The infected learned in minor ways. They started watching higher, started pausing at doors. They were not thinking like we think. They were reacting like a system that improved by accident. Late morning brought a new kind of trouble. The crowd changed. People who had slept through the first wave woke hungry and angry. A man tried to pry an officer's shield out of his hand to use it as a sled for his belongings. A woman hurled a can at an infected, missed, and drew 3 more. A teenager lit a fire in a trash barrel, and the smoke pulled infected from 2 blocks over like he had rung a dinner bell. "Put it out," Deacon said, and he didn't care who had lit it. We doused the barrel with a case of bottled water, and the teenager glared at me like I had drowned a pet. Midday, the sun managed to burn a hole in the grey. Heat cooked the street and made the stink rise. People got sloppy because day always lies and says it is kinder. The infected did not slow the way a drunk slows. They maintained a steady hum of bad decisions and sharp elbows. We established a small square at the library steps. Volunteers handed out masks from a cardboard box. A hospital tech showed up with a cooler that hummed and then died. He opened it and stared at what was inside with a look that said he had carried it far, and it now meant nothing. He closed it without showing anyone, and sat down on the steps like a man who had just been told his house was a mirage. Sophia took a corner of the steps and turned it into a tiny clinic. She kept her sleeve down. She washed her hands between each person with bottled water and dish soap, and dried them on a clean shirt she tore into strips. She told me who needed to move and who needed to rest and who needed to be left alone. She never raised her voice, and people listened like children in a classroom right after recess. At some point, the boy with the keychain fell asleep sitting upright against a column. His father folded a jacket under his head and sat in front of him as a shield that could be stood up in a second. Hui stood on the step above them and watched the corners the way a shopkeeper watches the aisles. Then the plaza shifted, not the ground, the flow. A clutch of infected came fast from the direction of Market, pulled by something loud we couldn't see. The volunteers tightened. The officers locked shields. The civilians hunched. Deacon took the front line. I took the right flank with 2 officers who looked like they were about to crack jokes and didn't. The first infected hit the line and stuck, hands on plastic, mouth open. The second hit and slid, then righted and struck like a bird at a window. The third flipped over the first 2, head over heels, hit the ground on all 4s, and launched at the gap between me and the next shield. I stepped and fired 1, 2. He folded, and then rolled like a doll dropped downstairs. 3 more came. We pushed. We did not break. A volunteer with a traffic vest and a mop held his ground like a pike soldier and jabbed with the mop handle at knees, not heads. Smart man, knees bend. Take knees and the rest follows. We held. We would have kept holding if a truck at the far end hadn't decided to help. It laid on the horn. The horn shouted across the square and turned every infected ear in 100 yards. The driver threw his arm out the window and yelled words I won't repeat. Then he gunned it like he was going to clear the block and save the day with gasoline and nerve. He made it 10 yards before a fire hydrant dented his oil pan. The horn kept going. "Get that horn off," Deacon snapped. I sprinted with another officer, cut behind the truck, and popped the hood. The driver panicked and grabbed at my arm, yelling for me to give him his keys back even though the keys were still in the ignition. I shoved him gently, then less gently, then yanked the horn relay out of the fuse box. The horn died like a thing strangled. The sudden silence gave me a new respect for quiet. By early afternoon, the city declared the square closed. A recorded message played on a loop on a portable speaker that someone set up on a folding chair, telling people to move north, to go home, to shelter. Home didn't mean what it used to mean to half the people listening. Hui listened with his jaw set. "Home is a door that closes," he said. "Tonight this is home." Deacon checked the radio and then checked his watch. He made a call. "We take our people back to the store," he said. "Station is too visible now. The store has angles we control. We reset. We wait for a wider plan." The route back was smoke and paper and footsteps that didn't match the number of people you saw. We took the long way. Twice we stopped and hid in plain sight while a cluster of infected jogged down the center line of a street like joggers at a fun run. The casualness of it made my tongue taste metal. We reached the store without taking a hit. Inside, the kids lay down behind the counter and fell into sleep the way kids do when adults make a wall with their bodies. Hyde locked the grate and reset the 2x4 with a motion that had become part of his bones. He turned the freezers back on. The hum felt like a heartbeat you could trust. Sophia sat at the back with her sleeve rolled. She looked at me, and then at the door. "It's time," she said. We stepped into the stockroom for privacy. She unwrapped the bandage. The bite was ugly, ringed and puffy. It did not drip. It did not look good. "I don't have a fever," she said. "My mind is clear. If I go bad, I want you to put me out. Not like a punishment. Like a kindness. Not near the kids." I didn't answer right away. I checked the skin around the bite. I felt for heat the way my mother taught me to check soup. Warm, yes, but not boiling. "The dog bit you 2 days ago," I said. "A dog bite is a dog bite. If you change, we handle it. Until then, you are a nurse, and I am a rookie, and we have a small city to keep alive inside this store." She smiled with one side of her mouth and pulled the sleeve down. "Deal," she said. We rotated watch. We rationed water. We ate half MREs and promised each other better meals when the city calmed. We listened for the sound that would mean it was over, knowing it wasn't coming. The store's bell clinked every time the wind hit the grate just right, and each time it did, Hyde reached up and stilled it with 2 fingers. Late afternoon leaned toward evening again, a full circle that felt like a trick. From the slit in the paper, I saw a man in a black hoodie leaning on the light pole where we had cuffed the first man. He slid down the pole and sat. He looked like a person waiting for a bus that wasn't on the schedule. Deacon leaned his shoulder against the frame beside me, his eyes tracking the street the way a hunter reads wind through grass. "First 24 are the hardest," he said after a while, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Not because of how many there are, because your head hasn't caught up yet. You react. That's all you can do. Plans come later, if we get later." "You've been through something like this before?" I asked, keeping my voice even, though I already knew by the weight in his tone what the answer would be. Deacon didn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the figure outside. A man in a dark hoodie slumped against the same light pole where we'd cuffed the first one earlier. The guy sat perfectly still, head tilted down, and yet something about his posture made the air feel heavier. Deacon watched him like he was reading an unfamiliar language and trying to decide if it was a warning or a story already over. He never answered my question. Inside, the store had gone quieter than I thought a room full of people could manage. Hyde had lowered the grate again and checked the locks twice. The kids were curled up behind the counter, dead asleep, small breaths hidden under the constant hum of the freezers. Sophia was in the back corner, sleeves down, reorganizing her makeshift medical supplies into neat, careful stacks like having order on one table might keep chaos from climbing through the window. Marco sat cross-legged against the chip rack, fishing line still wrapped around his hands, twisting it unconsciously like he wanted to tie the whole day into a knot and pull it tight. The radio kept spitting the same 2 statements, switching between them every 10 minutes like someone behind the mic couldn't decide which lie was safer. 1. Lockdowns in affected zones will expand by morning. 2. Assistance is en route. Stay where you are. We were left to choose which one to believe, or if believing either would get us killed faster. Nobody in the room said anything about it, but we were all hearing the same thing. No one was in charge anymore, at least not here. Outside, the street stayed restless. Every now and then, something heavy clanged against metal down the block. A bottle rolled into the gutter, tapped twice, then went still. Somewhere farther out, muffled shouting carried just long enough to make you wish it hadn't. Through the slit in the paper bag taped to the glass, I could see shadows shifting across the pavement, some walking with intent, some staggering in loops like their legs had forgotten instructions. You couldn't always tell the difference. Not yet. Deacon stayed at the window until his shoulders eased, just slightly. "Get what rest you can," he said finally, voice flat but softer than before. Tomorrow's not going to wait for us. Then he walked back toward the shelves without looking over his shoulder, and I couldn't tell if that was meant to comfort me or warn me. I sat on the cold tile near the door, back to the counter, radio on my lap, counting the slow drag of seconds as the light outside bled into grey. The city was holding its breath, but you could feel it trembling under the weight of whatever was coming next. The hum of the freezer filled the silence, steady and fragile, the kind of sound you don't notice until you're afraid it might stop. That's how the first day ended. No answers, no plan, just us behind a locked door, supplies stacked to one side, waiting for something we couldn't name. Somewhere out there, the Walking Dead was still moving, learning in short, jagged loops. And inside, we were doing the same in longer ones, pretending the thin walls between us and them were more than they really were. The city hadn't fallen, not yet, but if you listened close enough, you could hear it leaning. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.